Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. We are getting off the Bruce train tonight, though I'm sure he will come up, as he often does, and we're going to be on the classic rock and roll novels and a little bit of Nickelback. Beth, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Jesse. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so tell us a little about yourself.
I born in the Bronx, New York City, and when I was 5, we moved to Westchester, which is just a couple of miles from the Bronx. So I grew up there, and I have to say that being a native New Yorker is something that never leaves you, and I am very to say I'm a New Yorker, and it's the certain way that we are. It's just a mindset, and I could be gone for a year, and when I go back there, it the air, the feeling, it comes right back. Yeah, I did that, and I started hanging around musicians at the age of 16, going to the clubs, and that's how I got involved with the New York club scene, which was very big in the 70s and 80s. It was very vibrant, and the bandwidth of bands went from progressive to country to femi rock. There is a band that came out of that club scene. I don't know if I should say it, but they did come out of it. And you either followed a band and you followed them around, and we're talking the tri-state area. So it was Long Island, Westchester, New Jersey, Connecticut. So there was a lot of different places to go to. So you either followed the band or you hung out at that club and watched the different bands that came in. But I was very lucky that I started dating somebody from my neighborhood, and he was a roadie for the premier band at that time in the club circuit. So those guys became my friends, and actually, they knew my daughters, and that's how far the friendship had gone. And two of those people have since passed, and it's a shame because they were the most talented musicians. It just one was a phenomenal keyboard player, played mellotron, anything keyboards he could do,
Sure.
and the other was a guitarist, and he sat with Jimmy Page,
hmm
and he was that good.
I want to get more into that, but I'd like to start. So you're growing up there in the Bronx. Were your parents big music fans? What kind of music was your
Okay.
parents listening to?
Yes, I left the Bronx when I was 5 to move to
Right.
Westchester, but yes, they're big story. So the Beatles come out, and they're big, and I have an aunt who's really like my sister, totally into the Beatles. So Beatles and Stones. And
Right.
my mother was a 50s chick, but she progressed into the other stuff. My father, on the other hand, and we used to hate this, it was like torture. There was a station in New York at the time, WCBS, and they only played oldies. And now, when we're talking oldies, we're talking 50s. So we would be on a car ride to go to my grandparents out in Long Island, and it was like an hour plus, and he would have all the 50s, and we would groan. And my mother would even say, "Why don't you put something a little bit more newer on?" However, with that said, growing up, we hated it, and maybe we could convince him to put on another station. But the fact that I had that from my father made me appreciate that music now, and that it was really good. So when I listen to 50s, I think of my father, and I don't hate it. I kind of am glad that I had that. And also you're talking about the Ronettes and all of those female singers. I remember those things coming out. So that's the kind of music I grew up with. Yeah.
I'm so glad you told that story, Beth, because I talk a lot of that I find when I ask that question, most people can fall in one of two categories. The first is those that say, I enjoyed my parents' music, and then as I started getting older, I expanded my horizons and found my own music, but that love never left me. And the other is I couldn't stand my parents' music. And then when you hit 30, you go, that Johnny Cash guy dad liked a lot,
Yeah.
maybe he's pretty good. Right. So,
Yeah.
like that Chuck Berry guy, he might have had a little something. So, yes, I think that is. And also, I remember multiple years ago when Merle Haggard died, and
Right.
I felt like I lost my dad all over again because he loved
Yeah.
Merle Haggard. And so that connection, music really is a time machine, isn't it?
It is, because my father passed 10 years ago. And when I hear a song from that era, I just say, okay, Dad, I know you're with me. It's because it will randomly come on, and I'll say, thanks for the visit. I'm doing okay. And that's the way I relate that music. But you really learn to appreciate it, because it was the beginning of a lot of things. And yes, were the Beatles the beginning of a lot of things? Absolutely. The 50s, that music brought everything else in.
Yeah, it did. And if you listen to whether it's Bruce or the Rolling Stones or the Beatles or however you want, right? They all had that roots in rockabilly and rhythm and blues and early rock and roll. And yeah, there is that where that you and I think the really great musicians honor the where they came from, right? They appreciate and honor those who came before them, like on the steps that they're building on.
Yes, and so many of them will say that they went back to the 50s, and it would be, was it Roy Orbison? Was it, I don't know, there's a lot of doo-wop kind of guys, and I'm drawing a blank, but they will reflect and say, hey, I used to listen to this. And you're like, John Lennon was listening to such and such, but that's where
Yeah.
they got it from.
Yeah. There is and I'm going to ask you at the end of the episode about Thunder Road, but he has that line, Roy Orbison singing Only for the Lonely. And there is a live show, like a bootleg or something, where Roy Orbison's in a Bruce Springsteen show and they sing Happy Birthday to him.
Oh, wow, that's cool. That's
Yeah, that's very cool. So, as you're growing up and teenager and finding your lives, so talk to me how you discovered this club music and club scene. So that seems so cool to me. I was always one of the kids not doing that growing up in a small town in Louisiana. So talk to me how that happened.
I there was a big gang of us, which I probably will get into that in some of the other questions.
Okay.
And the age range for us was probably 6 years, but we all hung out together. And so there was a guy who's from the neighborhood, and we started dating, and he was a roadie for said band. And they were the premier act, and they were on the radio, they're playing heat. And so I went from, my name was left at the door at whatever club it was. And so I hooked in with the best group of guys that I could have done, and they became friends. And then the said person, who I am still close friends with today, we decided we were better off as best friends. And if we would be at a club and somebody was bothering me, he would come over and be like, hey, what's going on? But I did meet somebody from another band who is a bass player, and we started dating, and I moved in with him. And so then the club scene became my life. Whether I was going to school and still staying out till 3 o'clock in the morning and maybe having 3 hours of sleep, and it's just a way of life. Sleep till 2 o'clock in the afternoon if you can. And start it all over. It is a grind, but it was also fun because every club had a different vibe. Every club had a different group of people, except for the people who would travel because they wanted to see the band. I will say there, Glen Island Casino in New Rochelle, where the big bands used to play. On Tuesday nights in the summer, it was the Rock and Roll Palace, and there were two bands in the main room and downstairs, like this small place for an up and coming kind of band. And it was the Long Island Sound was there, and it was a place to be. And so sometimes boyfriend's band was with my friend's band, and for me that was like heaven because I could hang out. And then you expand your friend base because there are certain people who are really into the band because they're into the band. Now, the one thing I will say is hate groupies. I was not one. I was good friends or I was somebody's girlfriend. And I did watch that scene, and that's not great, whether it's females. And there are male groupies that want to be guitarists, want to be drummers. But I lived that, and you get to meet famous people because they know the band or whatever.
Sure.
And then I did offshoots of that. I had a friend whose brother was in England trying to make it. And he was on, I don't know if you remember this, Don Kirshner's rock concert.
I do. Love that
And
on Friday nights, right?
right.
Yeah.
And so it was, we all sat in her bedroom, which her place is where everybody went to smoke some kind of herbal thing. And it was okay with her parents. Everybody's huddled around, and her brother's band played this song. And the song was I Love Rock and Roll.
Okay.
Now, go back. Yeah, go forward many years. And I'm in the supermarket. I was living in Hawaii, and that's a whole different thing. But I'm in the supermarket with my three daughters, and I'm the shopping cart. And there's a song that's on, and I know it, and I'm like singing to it. And it's, wait, why do I know this song? And it was Joan Jett singing it. So I said, oh, wow. Now I know why I know it because it was my friend's brother who wrote that song. And I think he did manage Joan Jett. And he was married to 1940s famous actress's daughter. And I remember going to a 30th birthday party for him. And was it Rick Derringer was there? And the guys from Studio 54, I was sitting next to him, and he said, so are you coming to the club after this? And I said, what club do you own? And did it. And then when he told me, I was like, oh, okay. So there was that. There was also with the same friend, we met somebody who was the promotional manager at a big record company. So we got to do a lot of things, go to a lot of shows. And I told this story to somebody the other day. And here's the awareness that you need to have when you're hanging out with this kind of group of people. It was a party, and it was two hotel rooms adjoined, and it was our friend, and he had another friend, and it was just me and my girlfriend. And then there were a lot of DJs from the area and a couple other people. And there was, and I hope I can say this on the show, there was piles of cocaine everywhere.
Sure. Okay.
It's the 70s. It's the 70s. And eventually I started looking at the people that were coming in, and I said, do you realize that we're the only females here?
Yeah.
And I said, I'm uncomfortable. And so she was struck, and I said, think about it. I said, people are leaving, and I think we're being set up.
Yeah.
And as we're getting ready to leave, who walks through the door but Keith Moon in boxers and is drunk as anything, which, if you know anything about him, he was always drunk. So yeah, there's moments like that I have. And they're fun. And sometimes I say to myself, I don't know how I got through some of those things. It's a miracle that I'm alive. But yeah, the band scene was so vibrant and so big. And as the 80s started to hit, I don't
Hmm.
know what happened, but then the club scene started to slow down.
Yeah.
And I do, there are some friends who will play a local bar, someplace because that's all they know is to play music. The smart ones went and got what we call a straight job, which is what I ended up doing too. But it was a nagging thing for me because I didn't want to sing. I didn't have the guts to actually go and do it. Just like I wanted to act. And I also had a mother who was like, "You're crazy, you're not talented." You're so I put that down for years. And I've always been that rock and roll girl. And I taught my daughters from a young age. I put the Beatles, the Stones, Talking Heads, the Police, you name it, and they knew it. They knew it. This is Van Halen, and I gave them a wide variety of music to listen to, and they appreciate it, although they've gone in different directions. But the first concert when I moved back to New York from Hawaii, I took them to was Corn and Puddle of Mud. And people said to me, "Wait, that's the first concert you took your daughters to?" And I said, "Yeah, because my oldest daughter was totally into Jonathan Davis. And she's, Mom, we have to go." And I'm like, "Okay, well, let's buy tickets and go." So, yeah, we did. And it, I raised my kids with that Red Hot Chili Peppers, you name it. And we navigated the grunge together. It was sad when the club scene started to die down. And then I took the grown up path of, okay, I have this degree in business administration. I should go and luckily for me, it worked out well. Although that's where I met my ex-husband, so I don't know about that. But I have three beautiful daughters. But yeah, it was sad, and I know that some smaller bars will bring in musicians and have a music time, which is nice. Except when you're trying to eat dinner and the music is playing in the background, and it's like hard to have conversations. But that's the way it is now. There's no big clubs. Like there would be big clubs that on Saturday and Sunday, waiting in line, paying a cover fee, and I don't know. Maybe in the 90s in Seattle, the grunge era had that, but we haven't seen anything like that since.
Yeah. There was a, I'm not quite, I was a little bit older, 1988. So I guess I'm late 20s. And my wife and I were living in Dallas. We had moved from a small town in Louisiana, and we had discovered Deep Ellum, the local Dallas music scene. I remember with great fondness, you were talking about not getting much sleep. So there was a, we ended up being friends with her, but her name was Sarah Hickman, and she was a singer songwriter. And so she was just starting out, and she would play every Monday night at a small little club called Club Dada. And my wife and I would get home by 5:30, 6. We would eat something, and then we would set our alarm for 9 p.m. and we would try to take a nap. And then,
Hmm.
like by 9:30, we would drive downtown to be there for her 10 o'clock show. And we would stay till midnight. She would, do two sets with a
Yes.
small break in between. And then midnight would go home and then go to work the next day. My 65-year-old self goes, "How did you do that?" But then you didn't care.
No,
You
you didn't.
wanted to be at that live show. You wanted that music, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's amazing. So you, before we hit record, you told a funny story about a friend of yours pre-Born to Run preaching the gospel of the boss. If you don't mind, tell that story for my audience because I just thought it was wonderful.
Sure. Group, and it's one of your questions. What music did I listen to? We thought we were very heady and cool. So we listened to progressive rock. And back then it was Jethro Tull, it was Genesis, and I'm talking early Genesis,
Right.
a group called Nectar and Straubs, and Kansas' first album, not their second album. So we were listening to that kind of and The Who, some Zeppelin, but we were just into the progressive music, and we would all hang out. And this one friend of ours, Billy, and he was just a happy-go-lucky guy. And he's, oh man, I gotta tell you guys, I found I this he's so cool. And we're like, who is it? And he's, oh, his name's Bruce Springsteen. And he's got this album, Born to Run, and it first came out.
Yeah.
There was no play, and he would put it on and goes, oh, you guys gotta listen to it. And it was something so different from what we were listening to that it was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, yeah, we get it. And then he would take his harmonica out and he would be playing the harmonica, a couple of Bruce's songs. And it was just, okay, we know Billy's totally. And when he took off, he just looked at us and said, I told you guys. And we're like, okay, respect.
Yeah.
You were right. I'm still listening to my other music, but I respect. And Born to Run does have definitely some great classic cuts
Yeah.
that even somebody who's not necessarily a huge fan, that when it comes on the radio, you say, oh, yeah, I'm going to listen to this. This is
Yeah.
classic. How can I not listen to it?
Yeah. I just love that because we've all been there on both sides where we're incredibly passionate about a band and we're irritating the crap out of all our friends, right? Like, enough with this. And then we've been the other hand where all our friend is obsessed with someone and you're like, I get it, let it go,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So yeah, I love that story. That's awesome. It sounds as you got a straight job, as you talked about, a gig, but music has remained part of your life.
Absolutely.
Talk to me a little bit about that, and then I want to hear how you decided to write a book.
Okay. Yes, music, for me, music is something I need to listen to all the time. I was always the rocker girl. Totally married the wrong guy who knew nothing about music, nothing, which made it hard for car rides when I would say, we're putting in this CD, which, good God, CDs, even that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. But it is that, right, where I joke about my wife doesn't like science fiction, right? And so I'm like, we have a mixed marriage, right?
yeah,
So yeah, you're fighting a mixed marriage, right? Yeah.
he was just not, he couldn't, he wouldn't know a Beatles song from a Stones song. That's how bad he was. Okay. But music for me was always listen to it cleaning the house, because I knew deep down was that rock and roll girl, and there was nothing that was going to change that. And I had friends in Hawaii. If we girls go out, we would crank up the music. And so for me, music was so important. And as I said, when my children were young, I would put on the Beatles, put on the Stones, put on the Police. And when we were in the supermarket, I would look at them and say, who's this? And they would say, it's Sting without the Police. And I'm like, yes, you're right. And so, yeah. So even with my children growing up, music was big. And
Yeah.
I think it was an unfulfilled desire
Okay.
to not do something that maybe I was supposed to do and never did it or never had the guts to do it. Unfulfilled desire.
Okay.
So music now, like when I wake up in the morning to clean my house before I start writing, I put Spotify on and I have 4 different playlists. And I crank it up at 7 o'clock in the morning and it's, yep. And then I go work out and I'll put another playlist on and I crank that up. And sometimes when I'm writing, I crank up the music. For me, music, I always have to listen to it. And yes, there are certain songs that bring back a memory. It might be a bad memory, but it might be a good memory. But it brings us back to that place, right? We all have, oh, I remember this. And it will bring you back to a smell, to a place. And it just transcends you. And I think that's the wonderful thing about music. And if you really are into music, then you get that it takes back, whether it's bad or good, and it takes you. And so music for me is something I have to have.
Yeah.
So the book I've had it in my head, and I'm not exaggerating, for over 20 years.
Okay.
I'm living in Hawaii, whether it's cleaning the house or whatever. And I started to formulate this story in my head. And I always say it's like grayscale, or it was fuzzy. And I knew certain parts, I knew where it was going. My first ideas, the story was a little bit darker. And as I started, and it never left me, it would always come back, and it was always come back. I actually have 3 other stories that want to come out, but they're put on a bookshelf back in my head.
Okay.
I have a book club where I live, and I was starting to read all these ladies' book club books, and it's okay, it's basically the same thing. And I started saying to myself, that book that you've had in your head. And I don't want to sound like crazy, but I believe the universe, right, out there gives us signals and tells us, hey, you should write the book. And I was getting that very deeply. And I would walk into Hobby Lobby and I would see like the cutesy little sign that says, write the book. And I would go someplace else and I would get a message. And I said, okay, this is weird. And I won't forget this. I was in the shower and all of a sudden, dialogue, the characters' names, what they looked like started. I turned on the shower faucet and the story just started to pour out of me, literally pour out of me. That I got a janky old laptop that I hadn't used and I started writing it. And then I do have a very nice new laptop, obviously.
Yeah.
And I started writing and I started writing, and the book just kept coming and it kept coming. And then I started to look at, you're not going to I'm self published, and there's a lot of bad apples with self publishing.
Yeah.
And I was lucky. I went on a website that's called the Alliance of Self Publishing People. And there was only 7 green lit ones, to be honest and real. And people need to be aware. If you want to self-publish, there are very few honest and good ones. And I was lucky, I found a good one. I dealt with 2 bad ones, and I knew they were bad. And I found the person I'm working with, and we built a team because everybody's subcontracted. And as I was writing the book, I was showing it to the ladies in my book club. And I said, what do you think? And they're like, keep writing. And the hard part for me is that the book it's gritty. I do describe the music scene, and it is got a sexual component
Okay.
that is in the book, that's there. So every time I would get to that part, I would say, okay, I don't want to read this part, because I didn't want people looking at me like, what is she thinking? Oh my God, what's in her head? And
I
when
love that, Beth. That's great.
yeah, my daughters would say, Mom, read us. And I would say, okay, I'm going to stop now. And
Yeah.
they're like, why? And I said, because it's a sex scene and I don't really feel comfortable. And my daughters are grown up
Yeah,
and
exactly. But still, right.
I can't do it. they all have the book and they can read it, and they're probably still, what is in her head? I don't know what our mother is thinking.
That's
But
funny.
the story just literally poured out. And when I gave it to the publishing consultant, she looked at the word count and she said, This is 2 books. And I said, Really? And she goes, Yeah, you have way too many words here for 1 book. And I said, Okay. And then I got an editor who's fabulous, and we knew where we were going to break the book. And she said to me, Hey, I think where you left book 2, you should write a 3rd book,
Okay.
picking up from there. And I said, I can do that. Yeah, sure. So I started writing book 3, and book 3 is book 3 and 4.
Okay.
And the 5th one, I think, should be the end. They keep saying, keep going with it.
The characters keep living in your head, right?
Well, I will say this, that there are parts of it will be all 5 books, that there are moments in the book that are things that actually happened to me, or things that were actually said to me, or things that I actually said to people. I will not reveal what those are, but
Sure.
so I always tell people that Gina is me. And that's the lead female character, that she is me, and maybe she's the alter ego of what I wanted to be, but she is me and I am her. And even though I'm the one who wrote this, that, and what I'm doing now is book 1 is out, and book 2, they said 6 months, and now they're saying, no, let's get this out by August. So I'm working on final edits for book 2 so we can release it in August. And there is a lot of meat to that 2nd book. And every time I reread things, I cry like she would cry, or she has a list of sad songs that she plays. And every time I hear those songs, I'll start crying, because I'm feeling what the character's feeling. Because at this point, I feel like we're symbiotic. We're so closely tied together that I know I'm not her, but it just is, you become, the character becomes you. And that's the way it is for me.
Tell the name of the book.
The name of the book, first, it's called The Perfection Saga.
Okay.
And book 1 is called, and there was a lot of debate with my team about how we were going to name these books. The name that I had originally given the book was not what we came up with. The first book is called Playing Hard. And that's not in a perverse way, meaning playing hard. If you want to make it, and that's what it was in the 70s, you played your gigs hoping that an A&R guy from a record label was going to come, watch you play, and say, hey, let's do a demo. But here's the thing, you have to have original music. And a lot of bands that didn't make it they were great cover bands. But if you don't have the original music, the record company's not going to look at you. So they are doing both. The band is doing both. And so that's what Playing Hard is, paying your dues in everything. And I don't want to give too much away, but the characters come from 2 different bands. And then they become one. And then it is a romance, actually. It is about the 2 characters who come together and fall in love. And then it becomes, and there's a lot of interconnecting parts with the band. And it's about how they make it, how their relationships. And that's why book 2, which I can say the name because it's out there now, and I do have the cover, but I can't release it. The second one is called Playing High. And that book really reflects the title of the book. And it's a saga because the name of the band becomes Perfection. And it's their journey, and it's probably over 20 plus years.
Okay.
So I'm going to take you from them being like a basement band to being in the clubs. And then I also had to add in the changes that happen in the music industry. And
Right.
people need to be real about it because back in the day, you were courted by a record label and they would say, okay, give us a demo. And they would either thumbs up, thumbs down. And if you got a record deal, great. And then it started to move a little bit. And then we had the whole MTV explosion. And
Right.
how many bands do you remember who made it because their video was played every hour on MTV? And
Right.
what did we know about MTV, right? But what's that?
Yeah.
And it's a shame that MTV went away from what it was. I have to say that. And then we started moving into the indie labels, right? There's a lot of indie labels that came out. And now a lot of bands have their own record label. So they don't owe anything to anybody because they own their own record label. They put out their music the way they want. So the music industry has changed so much. And then remember the whole thing with Napster and the streaming of music. And that's important too, because people don't, it's not like an album release. People release something on Spotify or iHeart or whatever it is, and they'll release one song and then like next month they'll release another one, and they get to choose what they drop. And so different from the way it used to be. And I do go over those changes.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because when I love the playing hard because it has a double meaning, right? Playing hard at your craft, but also I'm sure young and you're playing hard off stage as well, right? And
Yes.
then and I can see playing high, you get too close to the sun where your wax wings, right, melt. So yeah, I
So
see that.
many.
And one of the things that I found interesting is one of my new musical obsessions is Jason Isbell, who's Americana, and he owns the record company now, right?
Right.
He
Yeah.
puts out his own music, right? Because it just works out better that way. And yeah, the and I had an artist, I had a young writer on who's going to college, Jake Thistle. He's had some success touring in local place in Jersey, and he talks about that sometimes he said people, and he's mature for his age. He said sometimes people think just because you get lightning in a bottle and you get hundreds of thousands of views, you've made it. And he says, and that's not a career.
Yeah.
That's a flash in the pan. And so, yeah, there is that. And I think that'll be an interesting saga because I don't know, but I don't know if the 21-year-old is wanting to sign with a record label now. And that's the Bruce thing. The record label just gave me a big advance, right? That's just
And they
not what the
owned
road.
you back then. They
Yeah.
owned you.
Yes, they
Remember
did.
Prince putting slave on his face?
Yeah. And
Um,
and changed, and the artist formerly known as that because of that. Yeah.
I
That
will say that I did write songs in all my books.
nice.
I wrote songs and I have put out a call to action in my TikTok reels because it's funny how your music things I listen to now. And so I called out those bands and I said, "Hey, I know you're prolific songwriters and they're magnificent and wonderful, and the bands have at least one group I'm thinking has really some deep thought songs,
Yeah.
and they don't need me. They don't need me at all, but it would be like I would like somebody to help me write the music to these
Yeah.
songs because I think some of them are really good,
Yeah.
and I will say they really define themselves as we are a hard rock band. We are
Yeah.
not, we're not going to play that kind of stuff. And the female character, they're having a writing session and she goes to check on them. And she said, let me see what you write. Cause she is basically the lyricist and the guys will pitch in. And she
Mhm.
said, yeah, what is this crap? Have we become ballad
Mhm.
songwriters? That's not who we are. And so she leaves in a huff. And she's just like, yeah, I can't.
Yeah.
And she sits down and she writes like 2 songs.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, this is better than what we came up with. There's that aspect of her. And she's a Long Island Italian girl whose family, let me just say, is well connected because as an Italian girl myself, there are some words that you just learn you don't say. So I'll just say her
Yes.
family is very wealthy and very connected. And even with that, I can say her and her cousin want to go on a different path.
Yeah.
And that's when they decide that he's already started the band and she inserts herself into it and says, I want to sing in your band. And he's, I don't know. And then when she starts to sing, I never knew you could sing as good as you. So yeah, there's, like I said, there's a lot of interrelationships that go on. And I felt them the whole time. And I still have book 5 to write. And I already know where I'm going with it. Like I have
Okay.
the outline in my head where it's going, how it's going to go.
What surprised you about writing the book?
Honestly, how good I actually can write, because
Nice.
out of all of the things that, because deep down inside I know I was meant to do something,
Okay.
right? Was it singing? Was it acting? I know was a fantastic mother, so take that off the table. I've done that. But I've always felt there was something missing and that I was meant to be out there somehow. And when I started writing and friends would read it, and then when book 1 came out, people were like, this is really good. And when I read back some of the things I wrote, I'm like, oh, wait, I actually wrote that. Okay, okay, yeah, I think I am good at this.
That's
And I think that
wonderful.
was the most surprising thing is it's
Good.
not hokey. And I do have an editor and a proofreader. And the one thing a lot of people will say is, oh, the editor slashed my book. I have not had that experience. They will say, you're off on your timeline, or you don't need to repeat this, you've already said it, or it'll be a grammatical thing. They have not really interfered with the heart of my book, which tells me, and my editor is like, you're Gina, come on.
Sure.
And she got it from the first version of the book. And I think that's the biggest thing. And everybody on my team is like, it's going to be a slow burn in the beginning. And the book only came out in April, and we're doing a lot of different promos. I just finished one promo. I'm going to do another one in July. And get this, I'm going to do the name of the company. I hope I can say it. I haven't signed the contract yet, but it's getting out there on all the book talks and all these
Nice.
things. And there was a couple of them. And my marketing gal said, there's goddess something. And she said, and then there's rock star. And I said, hands down, there's no question who we're going with.
Yeah,
And she
exactly, right?
laughed. And I did a podcast, I think last week, and the gentleman called me a rock star. And so now I'm running with it. And I'm like, okay, so I am that rock star. It may
Very
not
nice.
be. Yes. And I will say I am practicing my singing voice, which
Yay.
is yes. And I will say, in a sad way, that I can sing Pearl Jam really well. So Eddie Vedder and I must have a
Ha
very
ha ha. Yeah.
similar range. I don't know. And some bad company.
And
And it's good some days and when it's bad, but singers do have to watch out for that. When your voice is good, it's good and everything sounds great. But when you're bad, it's just shut up. Don't try to sing. It's you don't have it today.
yeah,
And I can't imagine going on tour and saying, "Oh my God, I'm having a bad day today. I got to go out."
you mentioned a little bit that you somehow have gotten involved in social media with Nickelback. Talk to me a little bit about that.
I don't know. I don't know how it happened. Like the band 20 years ago, and for some reason, and it was while I was writing the book, I just stumbled upon their fan page.
Okay.
And so I would see things and like it, whatever.
Hmm.
And the person who runs the page, who is now a very close friend of mine,
Okay.
and she's made me an administrator on that page. So I take it seriously. It's you have to make sure you post like other people's things, say, hey, that's great. And if you want to take it seriously, which I do. So it was so I was on the page just as like a top contributor, rising, whatever. And she wanted to have a video made for the fan page.
Right.
And stupid me, I'm writing my books. And now there's like 7,000 people on that page.
Yeah.
So when she said, hey, I have a project, she didn't say what it was. And I said, hey, I have some time. And I figured out of all the dudes, 7,000 people, she's not going to pick me.
Right.
Boom, she picked me. And there were phone calls, and there was another friend. We all became very close friends. And I did not know how to and the idea is that we used the song when we get together,
Yeah.
one of Nickelback songs, that we wanted to show unity and people of all different colors and that we really are one. And so I started it and I said, okay, this is my vision. What it's your project, like the sun rising and lead into this whole thing. And they're like, yes, we love it. We love it. And it just so happened that my eldest daughter was getting married in Hawaii and we were at Sunset Beach and we watched the sun go down. And I was like, oh, picture. And that's what I used those pictures to end that video. So now I don't know how to put these pictures together. I went on Clipchamp and in a weekend, I figured out how to do it.
How funny.
And it was like, okay, I got to transition. And I always say to her, I almost want to redo that video because now I know really how to do it even better. The hardest part was, and I kept saying to her, and there are pictures in the band mixed in there. And I said, they're okay with this, right? They're totally okay. And we had to take the song. Now,
Right.
on all of these video things, you're not allowed to use royalty music,
Hmm.
but we needed to because that was going on their page or
Right.
the fan page. Not knowing anything, I figured out how to do it. And I was talking to my daughter and I said, look, I got to put this on here. What do you think if I do it this way? And she said, yeah, okay. She goes, I don't know if it's going to work. And she said, but send it to yourself in an email. And I did. And it gave me the audio bar that I needed to place. And I was like, in a weekend, I had it done. And I said, here it is. Tell me what you think. And if you don't like it, we could scrap it. And they were like, oh my God, really?
Yeah.
And so that started that. And that started great friendships with them. And I've been trying to get a booth because they played a US tour and I was going to see them in Alabama. And when I was in Alabama, I was in North Carolina seeing that friend that started me in this. And it was flip-flop. So I never could catch up with the band. We said, hey, why don't we get a booth at one of their concerts, sell the book, promote the fan page. And I am so bold enough to say, we're not paying for a ticket though. Come
Yeah.
on. I said, I'm a backstage pass girl. We got to figure this out. Again, the universe comes in and says, they came back from Europe. They're playing a few gigs in Canada and the US. And we were trying to get a booth. And either it was at a blues festival, and I don't know why they're playing there. And I had to buy the booth for 5 days. And my friend said, I think I would go crazy. I said, so would I. So that's out.
Yeah.
And then there's a state fair in California that they're playing. And they said, I need to have a booth for 10 days. And I said, I only want it for 1 or 2 days when they play. I don't want to be there for all this other stuff. Because we both are believing that the universe brought us together. I would never, and she's from a small town in Louisiana, by the way.
Okay.
And that the two of us met at the most strangest way. And now we're good friends. We talk every day, literally every day.
Yeah.
And so that's how I got involved in it. And there's a lot of things that go on in fan pages. And you have
Sure.
the fangirls like Love Hard Kiss.
Yeah.
And some true people who are like, hey, they'll post something from YouTube, like their favorite song. And you say, yes, listen to
Yeah.
that song this morning. So it's being a cheerleader for the band, basically, is what you're doing, is being a
Sure.
cheerleader for the band. So she runs the page. She made me an administrator, and I take it serious. And I make sure that, because I have so much of my own social media going on, but I do make sure that I am very present on the page so that if I'm given a benefit to be an administrator on somebody's page, then I need to show
Sure.
up.
Yeah,
At
absolutely.
least I feel that way.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been so much fun. I just appreciate you spending time talking to me.
We
This has
can
been a
always do it
blast.
again. We can always do it
Absolutely.
again.
When the new second book comes out, right? Yeah, that's good.
The
Yeah.
second book is going to be, and I tell people, and my social media is, I'm on everything.
Okay.
And I do say that this book is a roller coaster ride, and it's going to kick you in the ass, and get ready because
Nice.
it's that book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How can someone reach you if they want to?
I do have a website, which is perfectionsaga.com.
Okay.
And there is a place where people can email me directly and I can answer them. I am on Facebook. I have two Facebook profiles. One is Beth Pellino-Dudzic, just my name.
Okay.
And then Beth Pellino-Dudzic author, that's my author's page. So if people want to look at that, my
Okay.
marketing person thought that was the way to do it. Although my daughters made me scrub my page of anything that had to do with them. They're off.
Understand.
Um,
That makes sense.
yes. And Instagram is also Dudzik. And Talk, I think, is, gosh, it's so weird because when you're on it, it's Beth at Perfection Saga 1. And my name is the lady because that's what my daughters call me, the lady.
Nice.
But if you put my name in, it's going to pop up. I'm on Threads, I'm on X, only because you really need to maintain a social media on everything.
You really
Because,
do.
yeah, and so I do it. And I used to do reels every day, and now I only do them when I need to because my marketing, I call her my marketing guru. She puts out trailers, she puts out
Yeah.
information. So I don't need to, I might have to copy them and put them on certain platforms that she hasn't put them on.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I might go on once to say, I rattle the book talk people on TikTok and say, You all want romance, you all want smut, you all want dirty, spicy. Then why don't buy my book? And you have to do that. I look at it this way, and you understand it. I'm branding myself, number one,
Yes.
as an author.
Yeah.
And then I'm obviously branding the book, and it's synonymous. But when you brand yourself, like my daughters are like, Mom, you're not the same mom that we grew up with. Your hair's different. I went through a metamorphosis I went on the keto diet and lost 78 pounds.
Yeah.
And I work out every day, and it's just become my lifestyle. So they're like, where is she? She's not here. And I said, no, I'm still your mom, but I might be a little bit sexier, and it might be a little, and I think that's what drives them crazy, because they're like, oh no, why?
Yeah.
But they have their journey, and I said, this is my path that I'm walking on now, and I've let so many things stop me in the way all these years that now it's no, I'm walking fast, I'm walking through doors, and I'm going to knock them down.
Good for you.
And I'm going to try to meet as many bands as I can, because I know that some of the bands that I like are peeking in, because you never know who's peeking in on your social media, because they don't have to leave their
Yes.
name. They
Yeah.
just, I believe that is actually happening. And I just say, hey, if you're watching, I do have songs. I'm willing to work with you. And I am. I'm willing to work with anybody on songs. And the other thing, Jesse, everybody asked you in the beginning of this journey is, where do you see your books?
Right.
In self-publishing, you say, I want to make back the money that I laid out, because it's big money. And,
Sure.
your audience should know, if you want to self-publish, and I'm not talking about uploading a book onto Amazon,
Right.
I'm talking about professionally done.
Yeah.
It's tens of thousands of dollars. But you need to put out a quality product if you want to get it
Right.
back, right?
Exactly. Yes.
So the first thing you say is, I want to make my money that I laid out. And then they say, then where else? And as an author, and like I said, I have 3 other stories that will probably be series, but I can't even think about them for probably another 2 years. And because there's streaming services on TV that are looking for content, that
Yeah.
they search for stuff.
Right.
And I said, yeah, I would love Netflix or Amazon Prime or Apple to come a calling. However, and I will stress this, and I had other people say, if they offered you, and I said, no, as a self-published person, I own everything. I don't share anything. So if somebody came a calling, I'd be like, you can throw a screenwriter, but I already promised my editor and my proofreader that we'll be writing the screenplay
Right.
for this show. And I can give up some control, but I am not giving up. Why should I
Yeah.
at this point? I'm not going to.
Absolutely. This was so much fun. Thank you. I loved visiting with you.
I loved
I
it too.
I've picked up the first book, so I'm looking forward to reading it. But before I let you go, I end
Yes.
every podcast with the Mary question. And what that is, Jay Armstrong, who was an honors English teacher in the Philadelphia area, when he was teaching, he's now retired, he would give his students the lyrics to Bruce Springsteen's Thunder Road. They would read it as if a poem, they would discuss it, and then at the end of the class, he would ask his students, does Mary get in the car? So that is your homework. And Beth, does as a storyteller, does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
Okay. And first, I will say that I read through the lyrics just because I know the song. And I said, I want to be real specific on what is being sang. And I say, yes, she does get in the car.
Okay.
And because she ain't got nothing happening, and the guys that she dated before, and this person is going to give her a new life.
Yeah.
They don't know where it's going to take them, but he says, we're not young anymore, so why not? Yeah, let's go. And I like to think that sometimes when your life seems like it's at a dead end, you got to shake the tree and say, what I'm doing is not working, so let me do something else. And yeah, I think she gets in the car with him because he's saying, hey, I'm into it. Let's do this together. Come on. I think she does.
Absolutely wonderful answer. All right. Once again, play hard. I will include the link to your website. The
Thank
book
you.
is available everywhere you want to find it. Check it out. There will other one coming later this summer, right?
Yep.
And
Yes.
so we will have you back to talk about it.
I can't wait.
Thank you. Any final words?
Just it was a pleasure. And I just love doing these music oriented podcasts because so many of them are some of the ones that I was saying is, oh, that's not me. I don't
Yeah.
want to talk about entrepreneurship. I want to talk about music. It's it's your love too. When two people have that, it just is an easy conversation.
It makes a
It's like I've
difference,
known
doesn't
you.
it? Yeah, exactly. It is. And it's universal. So I agree. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Best of luck, continued
Thank you.
success.
Thank you.
Listeners, check out the book, check out the website. Hey, there's a link where you can read the first chapter. That's
Yep.
all you got to do. So sign up. For now, be safe, be kind, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. Thank you for listening to Set Lusting Bruce. I hope you enjoyed our discussion of music, and I also hope you check out other episodes of the podcast. I've spent over 7 years talking to hundreds of music fans from around the world about the power and the magic of music. Please follow me on my socials. I'm still on Twitter, aka X, at Jesse Jackson DFW. The show is at Set Lusting Bruce. The show and I both still have a Facebook page. Please go there and like us. I'm part of a few other podcasts. On Perfectly Good Podcast, me and my co-host Sylvan are talking about every John Hyatt song in alphabetical order. Set Lusting Bruce and Perfectly Good Podcast are part of the Pantheon Podcast Network, where we have hundreds of shows dedicated to music. Please check them out. My good friend Charles and I talk all things Doctor Who on Next Stop Everywhere. Currently, I am part of the Small Council Matters podcast, where we are discussing the latest episode of House of the Dragon. And each week, Lou, Karen, and I talk about Babylon 5 and other pop culture topics on Last Best Hope for Conversation, part of the JKL Media podcast family. I would love to hear your feedback. Please send me an email at setlustingbruce@gmail.com. You can leave a voicemail, 469-249-2442. Give me your thoughts. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you dislike. Hook me up with someone you think would be a great guest. Getting to talk to people about music and other creative endeavors is my passion, and I hope that these conversations bring you a little joy, a little peace, and a whole lot of love. Thank you for listening,